So Eric's back from a trip down to Florida, and we decided to get together to do a video comparing our two cameras, but we wanted to compare something specific.
Right, specifically ISO. Now, ISO can be one of those things that, doesn't really come into play when you're composing images and creating images, but it could be something that can really make or break an image in the end.
Yeah, and it affects your shutter speed if you're shooting in dark environments, and sometimes you don't have any choice other than to put your ISO at a very high setting in order to get a fast enough shutter speed to get the shot. So I did a review of my Nikon Z6ii a few videos back, and I went through the ISO settings. I just took a picture of a static object on my little table back there and just went through every setting. You could see how the ISO does. But we thought, and some of you actually mentioned in the comments, to compare our two cameras.
Right, yeah. So I have the Canon R5. We're going to take a shot of a static object right next to each other at varying ISOs. And as we increase the ISO up to 4,000, 6,400 and beyond, see what they really look like.
Yeah, so we both have our cameras set up on tripods. We tried to get almost the same composition. I don't know if you can see it behind us, but we'll bring the camera over there. And we're both using 50mm native lenses set to f4. So we're trying to keep everything exactly the same, and we're just going to shoot. But just right out of the gate, we both noticed that the cameras, with the settings identical, they have a different look to them. So I think the Canon has a warmer tone to it, and the Nikon's is a little brighter, right?
So we'll see. We'll take the exact same shot next to each other and compare them in the computer, see what they look like.
All right, let's head over there. All right, so we're all set up over here.
Yeah,
and,
the image that we're getting here is of an old-timey camera, which ironically, we're going to sound like we're complaining about some of these high ISOs, which back in the film days, if you were shooting anything beyond 800 or 1600 at most, you're getting a lot of grain. Now with the digital sensors, 6400 is usually about the max.
No. I mean, with this camera, I've been going well above 6400 and getting usable images. So we'll see how Canon does, then we'll see. The Nikon Z6ii is supposed to be one of the better cameras with ISO performance, so let's see what happens. So here we are at ISO 100. Ready?
That should be nice and clean.
Yep. Okay. So now what do we want to go to?
That's going to double our exposure. That's why we're on tripods. So the shots are all the same, and...
Okay. So 400?
400.
This is exciting video, right? It's like watching paint dry.
800. Now 800 is a good indoor natural light ISO. Indoor portraits, things like that. It's 1600 now.
With my D750, once I hit 6400, I was done. I think you're going to be surprised with this, because you may surprise yourself with your camera.
I hope so.
But I know this camera's better than that.
12,800. Now I'm at 25,600.
Okay, let's go to, do you have a high setting?
Yes.
All right, let's go to those.
Oof. Scary.
This is high 3 for me.
My high is at 102,400. I think that's as high as I go.
Well, as high as I go is high 2. Let's see what high 2 is. I don't even know what this is. All right. So now we're going to take these memory cards and we're going to throw them in the computer, and we're going to see how they look in the computer, and then we'll talk about that, and we'll be back in a second. Okay, so we're in the computer now, and we're going to do a screenshot of these images, but we just figured out something that's a little bit different. Now, Eric's camera has more megapixels than ours, so as you can see here, when we zoom in and you look at the images, you're getting almost like a more zoomed in version of Eric's picture. But I think you'll get the idea of basically, what we're looking at here.
And we wanted to kind of leave it, native to what both cameras can do. So for some reason, the Nikon was exposing brighter than the Canon. So we left those images the way they are, and we'll leave the sizing, the cropping the way that it is here.
Yeah.
And we can just compare. This first one is at ISO 100. You're not going to see any difference. I mean, both of these just look amazing.
But there is a difference between the two cameras. I mean, yours is very dark here in the shadows. You can almost not see where it says Nikkor matte, where the Nikon's is very bright for some reason. Okay, so this is at ISO 200. Let's take a look.
And you're going to see the same exposure and cropping differences, but I mean at 200 you're not going to see any grain.
Where were you focusing? I was focusing right on where it says no,
I was
because it looks like,
focusing right here.
yeah, because yours, the numbers on the lens are much cleaner. And we were both at f4, right?
Yeah, maybe because I was just at more of an angle, but
Again, clean though.
they look good.
Both images are clean.
Yeah, once we get up to the higher ISOs, I want to maybe brighten up the shadows a little bit just to see what's recoverable in there.
Right. Okay, so this was ISO 400. Yours takes longer to load, I noticed.
Yes, it does. What is the sensor megapixels? on
Mine
there?
is 24.
Okay, mine's almost double that then. That's
Right.
why. And I do notice when I'm editing that it does take an extra few seconds to load the images.
Yeah, I think what happened is your focus is a little off like if you look at the shutter release on
Yeah.
your camera, it's out of focus, but mine's in focus. So
Yeah.
our I think our focus plane is a little bit different. Mine's a little further back than yours. Yours is a little more forward, and that's why the numbers on the lens of mine are out of focus. But
Right.
the back of the camera isn't, where yours is out of focus back
Yep.
there. All right, let's go on to ISO 800.
Okay, so this is ISO 800.
These still look really clean.
Yeah, I would not complain about this.
I mean, to me, it doesn't look any different than ISO 100.
No, if we weren't specifically looking for grain, you really wouldn't see a difference. Let me compare the R5 between 100 and 800, just so we can see what
Okay.
those look like next to each other.
So this is the R5 at 100 on the left, 800 on the right.
I mean, you can see a little bit. I mean, not really, though. There's a little bit of grain showing up in the darker shadows area over here, but boy.
Yeah, pretty good. Okay, so this ISO 1600, and I still think these are both going to be fine at this ISO. Looking pretty good here.
Yeah, like I said, if you weren't specifically looking for the grain,
I mean,
it's
this is-
there.
It's nitpicking,
Yeah,
but I
look.
mean, barely.
I wanna say
Totally usable.
Totally clean, but definitely usable.
Definitely. All right, 3200.
All right, now we're getting into some creative territory at ISO 3200. Both look really good.
Yeah. I see like in the Canon up in the top right corner here, it looks a little grainy in there.
Yeah,
I don't really see much on this one.
there really isn't, and
The Nikon looks really clean.
yeah, it actually looks cleaner. You can look at the out of focus areas in the bokeh in the back, and it's cleaner there too.
All right, let's move on to the next.
So what are these now? What do we
Okay,
have?
so this is ISO 6400. This is typically where, like my Nikon D750, I would start to not want to use the images anymore. And while there is a little bit of grain in there, it's not too bad. Like, definitely still usable.
No, and I'm noticing on the R5 noticeable grain.
Yeah. Now, is that just because it's darker, or is it?
If-
I'm not sure.
If I brighten it up, it's actually probably going to bring the grain out even more. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So let's zoom out here and see like around the picture. All right. Let's move on to the next one. Okay. So this is ISO 25600. Now, just from this view, like when you're looking out, these are usable images.
Yeah,
Like,
if you're
it's
looking at
not
this
horrendous,
on a phone or a computer,
it's not horrible, right?
it's when you dig in that you see. But look, I mean, you can really see the detail on the switches and dials and numbers on both of these images.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely noise in both of them. You know what's nice? The Nikon, is brighter right out of the gate, so you don't have to
Right.
add as much to it.
Yep.
Like the image on your camera, I feel like is dark.
Yeah.
So you'd want to bump that up, and that's going to show more noise. Where the Nikon image, it's brighter right out of the box for some reason.
Yeah.
So I guess that could be a good thing. All right, let's move on to the next one.
Let's go beyond.
Beyond. All right, this is ISO 51200. They're both not great.
No, I don't want to say a grainy mess, but pretty close to a grainy mess.
Yeah.
Not something I'd want to use.
But if you had to take this picture and it was dark and you had no other choice,
If it came down to getting the image or getting nothing,
right, that's what you have to do sometimes. Okay, so then you know what you can tell here also, the colors are off.
Yeah.
Like mine's got a greenish tint to it. Yours doesn't look as bad as mine.
yeah, the colors are definitely off. The contrast is off. Digging in, it looks like something that you took on your cell phone in 1999.
All right, but now on this is ISO 200 and something thousand on
Right.
the Nikon. I don't know what yours is.
I think
set
it's
at.
102,000.
Right. So mine's actually double what yours is.
Right, and they look pretty similar.
Yeah.
So I gotta say, I would say based on that. Well, now let's just look. Let's go to a usable ISO on each of them and just compare it to 100, just to kind of see what it looks like.
Okay, so that's 100,
Right.
and then let's go to,
That's 64.
go even past that. Go to 12,800.
Okay. So this is a Z6ii. On the left is ISO 100. On the right is ISO 12,800. And from here they look pretty similar. So
Yep.
let's dig in. So this is the R5 at 100 on the left and 20. What did we say? 12,800
12,800.
on the right.
Let's zoom in and see if there's a difference.
At 12,000, still looks pretty good.
It does, but you can definitely see the grain
Yeah.
up in the
Yeah.
like by the dials and where it says nichromat.
Yeah. I gotta say, at above 6,400, at 12,000, at 25,000, I gotta say the Z6ii looks better.
Okay, so what are the conclusions after looking at those? You were saying the Nikon Z6ii is a little cleaner, I think.
Yeah, well, up until you get to about maybe ISO 1600 to 3200, they're pretty
the same.
comparable,
Yeah.
and they're really not that grainy.
No.
It's unless you're really digging in and looking for it, it's really not that bad. I would say, once you get to about between 3200, 6400, they're similar. I would say the Z6ii is probably a little cleaner, I think, and at maybe 12,000, I'm not using what images I'm getting for the R5 at 12,000 and 25,000. I'm typically not using; they're just not usable.
Yeah,
Uh,
these are.
Right, and so I really found a difference. I think once you get there and above 64, once you get to 12 and 25, I think the Z6ii definitely has the advantage there.
So-
Anything above that it's just crazy.
So is this a better camera? No, it's not. If I was coming into this with no lenses and I didn't own anything, I would buy into Canon system because the images to me are warmer. And you know what's great? So if we were both had to take images in the dark and we had to rely on our ISO and the cameras to autofocus, the Canon's ISO may be a little less than this but in performance, but it's got a better autofocus system.
Right.
So he's going to get the shot where my camera's hunting around a little bit. This does not have the autofocus system that the Canon does.
Right, especially in the dark
Yeah.
environments. Yeah.
So these are the things that when you're shooting and looking at cameras and you have to decide, are you shooting portraits of people? I think Canon gives a warmer look to them. Are you going to be shooting at high ISO where this is going to be important to you because then maybe the Nikon is one that you want. So, and this is really not an apples to apples. The Z7 II would be the apples to apples comparison. Right. I just don't have that camera.
Right. So I think hand holding, street shooting, things like that, you definitely want a higher ISO, something like that. But
Yeah.
if most of your shooting is going to be done on a tripod, landscapes, things like that, where you don't have to worry about ISO, you have to look at what kind of shooting you're going to be doing.
Yeah, and there is a big price difference between these two cameras. I'm holding the 50mm 1.8 on the Nikon Z6 II. The lens is a $600-700 lens, and the camera itself is a little over $2,000.
Right.
What does that
This
cost?
comes in at probably about double that.
Right.
The camera is 3,800 or so, and this lens is about 2,000.
Right. So there's a big difference there. So it wasn't an apples to apples comparison. But if this is a great camera. I'm really enjoying using it. And the ISO performance on both of these cameras is really great. And if you have a DSLR, like, maybe a 5D Mark II, what was your last one?
5D
4,
yeah.
4, or a D750, or maybe a Nikon D850, I think these cameras are going to outperform those in almost every way, right?
Yeah, really. I mean, we were, once we got into the mirrorless, I guess about 2 years ago we started getting into it. When the autofocus systems caught up and Canon introduced the full frame mirrorless R camera, which had the same sensor as the 5D4, that's why I jumped on it. And the technology that are in these cameras, the mirrorless cameras, I think are already way ahead of what's in the DSLRs.
Yeah, I mean, and just the functionality, the touch screens and the screen, the flippy screen on yours, and focus peaking. I mean, there's so many different things in these cameras that really make it easier to use and more of a pleasure to go out and shoot. And I find myself still using. Do you use the screen more, or do you still use your eye cup?
I still use the the viewfinder much more. Yeah.
But when I'm on a tripod, I never use it. I only use the screen.
Yeah.
Like always,
Right.
day, night, whatever. I just use the screen. But I do find that when I'm shooting in the daylight, especially, I will use the eye cup.
Right.
But you have the option of not anymore, and you can quickly just touch your focus points. It's
Yeah.
great. It's great.
Yeah.
So I don't know if this helps you in any way.
But I think it's a really good look at how these cameras perform, and how really well they perform at the high ISOs. And if high ISO shooting is something you're going to be doing, like I said, street photography, maybe dark environments, walking around interiors, museums, and things like that, you're going to want to look at something that has a good high ISO performance. And something like the Z6ii at 3200, 6400, and even a little bit higher than that really holds up really well.
Completely usable. And what's great about it is now I've gone to just leaving my ISO set in auto ISO because I don't worry about it anymore.
Right.
If I'm outdoors, I don't have to think about it because I know it's bright enough. But as soon as I step into an environment where it's going to be challenging for the camera and I would have to think a lot about all my different settings, that's one I don't have to worry about now.
Yeah.
I have my shutter speed parameters set, and I'm good to go, and the images have been usable in almost every situation, so it's been good.
Like you said, better off getting a sharp shot at ISO 12,000 than a blurry shot at ISO 1600.
Right, and those images we showed you, we didn't apply any noise reduction or anything to them, so you can actually make them look a little bit better once you're editing.
Right.
Okay, so we'll drop a couple of videos here about our two cameras, or there's a playlist of each one, right?
Yeah.
All right, so we'll put the playlist for these two cameras if you want to dig into it a little bit more, and we'll see you
next time.
All right, see you later.